Hello there, capers, and welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast for a place to hang your cape. And this week, we're talking about a book this time. Ooh my, how sophisticated we've become. Cue the music! Hello there, capers, and as I said, welcome to Podcapers, the official podcast of a place to hang your cape. My name is Scott James Merridew, and this is a show where we talk about various geek and nerd-related topics, and are joined each week by a very special different guest. Now this week, we're joined by not a comic book author, but a novel author, an actual book author. He's written many books, and is also, I'm told, quite adept at martial arts. Oh dear God, he's multi-talented. Please, capers, give it up for Orlando Sanchez!
Hey, how's it going?
It's going very well. Now, just so you know, just so the capers know, I am coming off a bit of a cold, had a bit of a lurgy, so if I cough during the episode, I'm not dying, I'm just deathly ill! But how are you? How are you doing, more importantly?
I'm doing well. Getting over our last storm that you got the end result of.
Oh, God. Oh, so you... Oh, God, yeah. It's... weather so far has not been kind to a lot of people. But do you know what gets me through bad weather? A good book. Curling up,
Yes.
nice and warm with a good book. And you know what? Your book, Tomb Yards and Butterflies, got it right here.
Yes.
Damn good book!
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. Yeah.
I really liked it. I like fantasy novels, I like fantasy stories, and I also like mystery stories. So this works out well for me.
It's a good combination of both, yes.
It's a very good combination. But before we talk about the book, just tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you? Why do you deserve to be on this show?
Let's see. Well, I was introduced to the show, and I enjoy writing fantasy, urban. I grew up in the superhero kind of world, and
You grew up in Gotham City?
Yes. Yeah. I just didn't go out at night. That's basically it.
Not a good idea in Gotham.
Not a good idea in Gotham. No.
Oh, God. But so
Yeah.
you're an author, you're a martial artist.
Yes.
Where do you find the time, man?
I don't sleep. It's basically it.
So you are like Batman then. When does he find time to sleep?
Yeah. No one has seen both of us in the same room at the same time. So, yeah.
Finally solved that mystery. Yeah. So,
Exactly. You go.
And so, urban fantasy, what got
Right.
you into that? What is about that genre, subgenre that appeals to you?
It's the genre that I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons when I grew up. And it's a genre that I've always enjoyed reading. And so when I wanted to read about the characters that I created, that book didn't exist. And so I was told, if it doesn't exist, write it.
The George
It's very
Lucas
easy to
formula.
say. Yeah, it's very easy to say, not so easy to do. It took a while. But
Oh, yeah.
I've always enjoyed the urban fantasy genre, placing magic in modern times. It's always fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you've listed some of your inspirations as Terry Pratchett and
Yes.
Jim Butcher, and
Yeah.
I've only read one Jim Butcher book, the first
Yeah.
what's his face, Harry Dresden book, and
Yes.
I've read a fair few Terry Pratchett books. He's one of the best authors of all time.
Sir Terry is a master of the craft.
God.
I can't speak highly enough of him. He's just an amazing influence. So Terry's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it really shows here because I mean, yours is a bit more down to earth and a bit more grounded.
Sure.
But
Yes.
just talking about Jim Butcher, I mean, I did read before this book. I ended up reading Stormfront, the first Harry Dresden book.
That's the first one. Yes.
Yeah, and at first I thought like, oh, is this going to influence my thought on your book because they're both urban fantasies, both deal with magicians and detectives. But there's a
Not
very
really.
big difference between the two of them.
Yes.
I really think because I mean,
Yeah, Harry's a little darker. Butcher's books are a little darker.
they're very
Mine-
noir.
Yeah, very noir, Dashiell Hammett type feel. My books are a little lighter. They do deal with some serious in situations, but most of them are it's the banter between the characters that make it lighthearted.
Yeah,
And so they're dealing with end of the world stuff, and yet they're having arguments among each other about more mundane stuff. Like, you forgot the gun? Kind of, yeah, there's a creature trying to kill us.
God
Hello.
damn it, Simon!
Yeah, exactly. So it's very much a buddy cop kind of feel
It's the difference
with
between
some
Raymond
magic
Chandler.
touches there.
So it's the difference between
Yeah,
Raymond Chandler and Lethal Weapon.
exactly. It's more leans a little more towards the Lethal Weapon side.
Obviously, talking about what got you into writing and stuff, and what got you into urban fantasy. What got you've written books before this, though, right?
Yes, I have a few books I've written before Two Mirrors and Butterflies, and I got the idea for Two Mirrors and Butterflies. I belong to a writers group called the WTA, Writers to Authors, and they're not really safe the way they joke around, and they have a very peculiar sense of humor, and they kind of influenced my thought process a bit. And I was in the middle of another series, the Sepia Blue series, when I got hit with the idea for Two Mirrors and Butterflies. And I did what I usually recommend people never do, which is start under the series or a book when you're in the midst of a series.
If it worked for Leonardo da Vinci, it works for you.
Yeah, so I did that, and then it just took off, and now I have one series kind of in limbo, which is the Sepia Blue series, but the Montague and Strong have gone on. I'm on the 6th book now, so it's doing really well.
Yeah, I'd say it's safe to say you found your footing with these guys.
Yes, and I can actually say with some confidence that I found my voice, in terms of my writing voice, because the books are very easy for me to write.
But they're very easy to read as well. Because even though we're Two Mirrors and Butterflies, just to clarify, is this the first book in the series?
Yes, it's the first actual book in the series. There's a short story before that book, which is called No God is Safe. And it's kind of the story where Monty and Simon actually meet. But that's the first actual book in the series, yes.
Yes, because I kept on wondering, because I thought this was definitely the first book, but it's like we've met these characters before, and there's a lot of backstory, but we don't know all the answers. But despite that we don't have a complete picture of who these guys are and where they come from, it's very, very easy to get in their heads, get in their world, and get their relationship.
Yeah, I wanted to write the books in a way that you could meet the characters where you would meet a person. So when you meet a person, you don't know everything about them. You kind of start discovering them a little bit at a time, day by day. And
unless you stalk them, in which case.
Unless you stalk them, exactly. So you meet these characters, they're in the middle of doing things, and you don't get the entire story. And that was intentional. It kind of creates a little bit of mystery about them that you want to discover. You want to find out more.
I do want to find out more.
Yeah. It's the next book. You got to just keep going to the next book.
Well, in Two Mirrors and Butterflies, there's a sneak peek of the next book.
There's always a sneak peek at the end, yeah.
I do like it when books have that, because it's like when you watch a TV series, and like next time or blank.
Yeah. That's very much the serial type of like when you grew up watching TV back in my day, and you got that sneak preview of what's coming next week. This is the same thing with the books.
Yeah, and it's always nice to have the little tease, and it's good. That's what I like about the detective formula, because there's always new cases, there's always new exploits and adventures.
Yes.
And even though in this one, a lot of stuff happens, a lot of big stuff, lots of we meet a lot of giant like gods and entities. In this book. I mean, just to name a few, there's Charon, there's Kali, there's Karma, there's Chaos, there's a guy called Corbel. A lot of people starting with like K-sounding names.
K-sounding names, yeah. To get away from that for a little while. There was a lot of K's and C's. So it was like, okay, let's change that up just a bit.
It's still cool because they all feel very independent of each other and have their own sort of rules and law and ideas behind them. Like Karma, I keep on like, ooh, there's so much. I want to spend more time with her.
Yeah. Karma's a lot of fun to write. It's a she in my world, and she is so much fun to write because of the way she interacts with Simon and how she appears.
Hi, sweetie, smack.
Yeah, she always makes a real impression when she comes in
on his face.
Well, she's an entity of causality. So even though she's embodied as a female, she's still a force of cause and effect. And so he has a hard time dealing with that and kind of like that. And so it's a lot of fun to write her. She's almost in every book. She's not in every book, but I think she appears at least once in every book because it's Karma, and Karma's always there,
It follows you around.
Oh, yeah.
Making notes of everything you do.
Eventually, life is a circle, so it always catches up with you.
Yeah. So just for the few capers who haven't read this book yet, just give us a brief intro to Montague and Strong. Who are they? What do they do? What's all about them?
Wow. So Tristan Montague is a mage who's been around about a little over 200 years.
Yeah. Not a
And
sorcerer. Not a
not a
sorcerer.
don't call him a sorcerer. He has an acute dislike of the title sorcerer or wizard because for him, he's English, and therefore he believes that mages are above wizards and sorcerers because they study and they don't use a focus. They are the focus. And he carries his English upbringing with him when he deals with situations.
As
So he's
well
very,
he should.
as well he should, and his love of tea. And so he's very much down to earth in terms of he doesn't have the same kind of sense of humor as Simon does. Simon is an American detective who's been cursed alive. So he's immortal. He's not pleased about it, but he doesn't have a choice.
He's very Jack Harkness about it all.
Yeah, very Jack Harkness. And he's the one that runs in first and thinks second, whereas Monty's like, well, maybe we should give this some thought. And by the time he's saying that, Simon's already rushed headlong into the situation. So they work well together because Simon's exuberance and brashness is set off well by Monty's thoughtfulness. This isn't to say Monty doesn't get upset and doesn't have a sense of humor, but it's very English, and so it's a little bit more reserved. He doesn't get as excited as Simon does, and he's very calm in the midst of the chaos. Whereas Simon overreacts, gets crazy, fires first, thinks second, kind of thing. What's English and what's American and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. Now, didn't you have an English advisory team helping you?
I do. I still have them. So when I went to London last summer, I met a few of my readers. Prior to meeting them, though, I have the T, which is the English advisory. And so anything that was English that I was unsure of, I'd email them or I'd speak to them because they would be able to tell me, this is how you say certain things. No, this is how we feel about this. This is the language you use.
It's spelled with a U. It's spelled with a U.
Yes, exactly. And so they helped me shape Montague's reactions to certain things and the way he would say certain things and just his general demeanor. And they still do. I mean, every book I have questions because as much as I've loved London and I've been to England, I'm not English. And so I have to be able to say, this is the way an English person would see this. Or if I destroy Hyde Park, I need to know what part of the park would be acceptable to destroy or things like that. Or would I get people upset if certain
None of
parts
it. You leave Hyde Park a bloody alone.
Obliterated. So things like that. And yeah, but they're my English advisory for sure. Anything that's English, I ask them and they tell me, and they come from enough parts of England, London, and different parts outside, and some are from Wales. So they can give me an idea.
That's not English. That's as far removed from England as you can get. Fuck Wales.
Yes, and I keep hearing that. Yeah.
Don't go to Wales. I don't know have you been to Wales?
I have not. Yes.
Don't.
No.
Don't.
Well,
it's full of sheep and valleys and rain and choirs.
Yeah, and aside from signs that I can't pronounce because I don't know what's going on with Wales in terms of that, but yeah, half the things that you can't pronounce if you're not from Wales. So
I have bad experiences in Wales. I have bad experiences.
Isn't your prince from Wales though?
No, he's the Prince of Wales. He's the Prince of Wales. The Duke of Edinburgh isn't from Edinburgh. He's from fucking Greece. I don't know, but
oh really? Yeah, so he's the Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales, and Duke of Cambridge, Duchess of Cornwall is just like yeah. I own this now. Tough shit, commoners.
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't been to Wales. I don't intend to go there anytime soon. But the next time I do go across the pond, I'll pop over and visit Wales.
At your own peril. At your own peril.
At my own peril.
The people there, very nice. Can't speak highly enough of the Welsh people. It's the country they live in that's so shit.
Oh, it's just the country itself that's horrible.
Yeah, oh God, it's awful. But speaking as an English person, I have to say, I approve of like 99.9% of the idioms you make Montague use.
I'm glad I got 99.9. Yes, that was what I was going for. It was
Yeah,
very important that Monty sound authentic English.
yeah.
Yes.
I mean, literally the only two things I point out was like, at least from my perspective, most English people don't say the word bollocks anymore. And when we say the word,
True, but
and
I wanted to just have that part of him. Yeah.
yeah, and also when we say pissed, we usually mean drunk, not angry.
Yes. Piss drunk.
Is drunk. But
Yes.
those are the only two things I could find, which is a
Yeah.
lot better than, again, 99.9% of any
Yes.
American author, writer, actor, whatever,
Writing
portraying
English.
or writing an English person. So you're ahead of the game, honestly.
Quite well. Yeah, it was very important for me to have the advisory because the fact that he says bollocks is kind of a nod to, even though he's very sophisticated, there's a side to him that is not. So he'll on occasion that'll come out, and the piss is just a nod to he kind of caters to Simon's American sensibility.
Okay, so he translates himself for Simon's benefit.
Exactly. Yeah, half the time Monty says things Simon can't understand them anyway, because
Laurie.
and so he has to dumb it down a bit for Simon, and so that's their constant back and forth is you don't even speak English, you speak American, and Americans have the same thing. Americans say we can't understand English, one because of the accent and one because you use very different words like lorry for truck and things like that. So
Yeah, Laurie. If I ever meet Chuck Laurie, I'm going to call him Chuck Truck.
there you go.
God, yeah. But speaking of Simon Strong, I mean, he's a very compelling protagonist because it's his perspective that we're following through. It's a Montague and Strong novel, but it's always Simon Strong that we're following. And it's interesting because with things with immortal characters, that's always very tricky to write because
It is.
Because you're either going to make it like who's immortal, but it's not really a factor, or he's immortal, which means he's so divorced from the rest of humanity we can't really identify with him. You've managed to get a great middle ground because, he's immortal, but it's a very recent thing, and he doesn't quite know the limitations of it, what's going on with it, at least in this book, the first book. So it really works out well because I've had very few stories that deal with immortality focus on people that are newly immortal.
Yeah, usually the immortals have been immortal for millennia, and so they're so powerful that they're near godhood. And I figure, why don't we have someone who just became immortal and is still kind of clueless about this world he's been thrust into because he doesn't know about mages and wizards or these gods that he's forced to face. And so he's really kind of clueless in this world where Monty has a lot more expertise and is kind of ushering him around and kind of explaining things to him. But he's kind of been dropped into the deep end of the pool and doesn't know what's going on. And he's basically flying by the seat of his pants.
And it also makes him good as an audience surrogate as well.
Right, yeah, because we're just as clueless as Simon. So Simon's basically telling the story, and he doesn't know half the things that are going on. So Monty explains it to him, and then the characters that he meets, he gets a little bit more insight, but he's still kind of like, I don't know how any of this works. What's going on? What do you mean? And so the audience gets caught up in that because most of the time we're just as lost as Simon, which is great. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's another thing, because he's learning so much about these different characters, and one thing I really like about this book, and something I like in any sort of novel or story or whatever, is the world building and the lore. Because the more lore you have, as long as it's not like overstuffed with something, the more it informs the world and makes it stand out from other stories. And this has got some really cool world building in it because there's lots of different organizations and people that really inform how this world works.
Yeah, it was really important for me to have a robust world, not just kind of drop these characters into a place and just have them do things, but to kind of have a lot of structure around them so that when they did, and you'll see if you ever read any more of the books, they become notorious for just destroying things, which is what they do. And usually it's Montague who does the destroying, but Simon gets the blame for it. And so it's because Montague unleashes some kind of spell or something, but yet Simon ends up getting caught as responsible for it. And so the world itself. Like, I love the city that I'm in. I live in New York, but I also have the fourth book. It's in London. It's set in London,
Ooh.
and we just have this such a fun run through all of London, because it's basically, after my visit to London, I just basically revisited all the places I walked through in London in that book and incorporated it into the story. So it was just so much fun. But
Because you
yeah,
can Google a place, you can Google map a place, or like Google
yeah, you
Street View or
can.
something, but it's not the
Sure.
same as actually being there and walking
No,
through
it's not
it.
the same. No, like, like I have a part where I'm in the tube, and yes, you can Google the tube, but it's not the same as going into the tube and waiting on the platform and seeing how the actual train fits the tunnel, and how people get on the train kind of have to stand on it as you're closer to the door, because the tube it really is a tube. It's not rectangular like here. The tubes are cylindrical.
Hmm.
And so it's things like that. And walking around Trafalgar Square or Piccadilly Circus is very different than Googling it. And so, yeah, it's really a lot of fun going to the places.
It's like the difference between watching Train Spotting and seeing the opening scene on Princes
Yeah,
Street here in Edinburgh
yeah,
and actually walking down Princes Street. Although you
yes.
can't actually walk down Princes Street because it's always chocker. There's always so
Right.
many people. You can't
People,
do that anymore.
yes.
I tried once, like the first time I went down Princes Street, I had the theme song going in my head, like dun dun
Yeah, yeah.
dun 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 dun.
But
I
you
thought I'm
can't.
gonna start running, and I can't
No,
because there's
not
too many
really.
people.
You got to stomp all over people because it's just too crowded.
Yeah, you
And
do.
I found it, like, when I went to Trafalgar Square and I'm sitting there, and I actually sat like on up near one of the lions, which is great. And you get to see the entire square. It's fantastic. And I walked from um, Parliament. So I walked from the Houses of Parliament all the way down to Trafalgar Square, which is a nice walk. And so I kind of incorporated all that into what I was doing and some of their escape routes and things like that. So that was a lot of fun. And you can't do that on Google Maps. It's not the same. You don't get the same feel.
No, and it's always just a bit limited and stuff. And
It is,
you're just watching snapshots. Is another thing when you
basically,
actually
yeah.
go into it. I mean, I've been to London a few times, but I don't have the best memories of it. A couple of times, a nice
Hmm.
experience. But I mean, I've been to Trafalgar Square, and I remember
Yeah,
the first time I went there, started going down the steps towards it, tripped on like the
yeah,
second step, fell down all the stairs,
yeah.
one
That's
after the other
fun.
after the other. I was I was young, so my bones were kind of rubbery, so it wasn't
That's
really
good.
that. But I just
That's really
landed in front
good.
of the pigeons, and everyone
Please
just
don't do that now. Don't do that now.
no, no, it wasn't
And there are
fun.
a lot of buskers, what we call street performers here. You call buskers there, followers of that over there. So those elements you don't see from pictures. Those you have to be there to experience the crowds, experience the space,
The
and
feel of the city, the pulse,
yeah,
the
you
rhythm, the
feel it.
heartbeat.
Exactly. You get that, and so it makes a big difference when you write it.
Because it's
And then I get to
urban
this.
fantasy. It's urban fantasy. You gotta know the
Exactly.
city.
You have to know the city. So that's why a lot of my books are set in New York, because I was raised in. It's a character unto itself, and so a lot of my stories are set in New York because of that, because I know the city so well. But it's also a really diverse city, and there are a lot of areas that even people who live here don't know that you. And they tell me, I didn't realize this was in our city when they read the books. And so yeah, you just got to go out there and find it. It's there.
Maybe go outside Greenwich Village, guys, once in a
Yeah,
while.
exactly.
Maybe.
Just visit the actual city. Don't stay in one little area. Go
There's
out
a
and
Spanish Harlem too?
yeah, right, exactly. Things like that.
Oh,
It's
God.
amazing, but there are so many things in the city that exist, that have been here forever, and people who live here, were born here, don't know it. But I guess it's every city has that in a way.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta get out of the tour bus sometimes and just,
Yeah.
take a chance, take a gamble. Maybe go down that darkened alley. You could
Yeah.
get mugged. You never know.
Well, that's what I did in London. I didn't take any tour bus. I would get off to the London Eye, and then from the London Eye, I walked in one direction all the way to Canary Wharf,
Hmm?
and then I walked in the other direction. I followed the Thames,
The
and I walked
Thames?
way, I don't know where I was.
The Thames?
Yeah,
The
yes,
Thames,
all the
you
way.
mean?
The Thames. Yes, all the way the other direction, and then I crossed over the Thames
Hmm.
and went into London proper, so and get lost.
Yeah,
Which is the best way to discover a city.
it's best way because I mean, whenever at all, they're always going to show the most sanitized, the most popular
Yeah.
version, and you need to experience the place as a whole, I think.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And so, we need to talk about the world building and the characters and stuff. Describe the actual process you have for writing, because every writer has a different process. When you sit down to write, what do you do?
Well, I outline 2 to 3 days prior to actually sitting down and writing. I like to work from an outline. I tried the whole write as you go, pantsing style. It doesn't work. You just go. For me, it doesn't work, at least.
It's unstructured, and it's like you're
It's
lost.
unstructured. Yeah, and you end up going down all these tangents that eventually just take more time. So, because the Montague and Strong stories are they're so well formed in my head, when I outline it, I'm really clear about what I want the story to say. And so I'll take 2 to 3 days to outline it, and then I usually have the first chapter because I already did it for the prior book. And so it's my jump point. I'll just start from then and go from then. My outline is always close when I write. So I'll sit down, I have my outline next to me, and I write with a timer. So I'll usually write for an hour, then stop for like 20, 30 minutes so I don't turn into a slug, and then get up, stretch.
Warning, excessive writing will turn you into a mollusk.
Yes, it will. And then I'll get up and do something, move around, and then go back. And so I do like 1 hour sprints and just keep doing that until I usually have a quote of like 2,000 to 3,000 words a day. But if the story's flowing, I can sometimes do 4,000 or 5,000 words a day. So
when you're in the zone.
Yeah.
When you're on that writing high.
Right, and I just won't pay attention to the quota. The minimum quota is about 2,000 words a day. And then I can usually hit that in a few hours. But then I'll get into the story, or I'll have like a particularly difficult part that needs to get unraveled, and I don't want to stop. I'll just get past that, and it can easily flow into like 3,000, 4,000 words.
Nice. I think that's a very good way of doing it, because whenever I write, I usually do like a bare bones structure, outline, skeleton thing, and then sort of fill that in as I go. I've tried in the past to start maybe writing books and just come out with ideas and just try and put them on. I don't think I have the right temperament for it, because I get very impatient. It's just like, I want to get to the fun stuff. And it's just like, and then he said, but then he explained it. And I get the minutiae of it is very sort of boring for me. I much more enjoy reading books than I do actually writing them, I think.
Everyone who says writing a book is easy is lying to you. It's not. No. It's not easy at all.
Writing any story is not easy. It doesn't matter what format it is.
It's not easy. It doesn't matter the format, the medium. It's not easy. And I know a lot of writers who say the characters speak to them and they get their books done. So it all depends on what process works best for you. But for me, I've done both. I've tried both, and the outline works best for me because I write to deadlines. Like, I have an editor who needs to get the manuscript, so I can't sit down and just sit there day after day thinking about when is the story going to come. It doesn't work like that for me. Every day I write. I wake up and I get ready to go. Because
it's a job. It's a job.
Yeah, it's for me. It's a career. I'm making a living from writing, and so I don't have time to wait for the muse. The muse better be there when I get up and start writing.
Better get our ass to work on time.
Yeah, exactly. She better be there before I'm there. And so, I don't have time to wait for the muse to hit. And the muse, like I've always heard and said, the muse will hit you usually in the midst of when you're writing. I've had most of my ideas while I was writing. Yeah. So.
Yeah, because when you're in that sort of mindset, when you're in that frame of mind, that's when the ideas come. I mean, I've been in a position where I'm doing something else, and then suddenly, idea, and I write it down. But that's,
you gotta write it down.
Once in every blue moon, you can't do that you can't live off that.
No, you have to have a journeyman feel. This an attitude of I have to write every day, whether I feel inspired or not. I've got to write. And so what happens is that as you do that, it's like a muscle. You start really developing your imagination and your storytelling. And if you do it every day, it gets easier to come up with these stories. And I've had entire stories come while I'm in the middle of another book, which I've had to stop, write, and get out of my head, or else it just nags me. And then I can continue with the book. And then I go on and do that story.
Little character on your shoulder going, write me.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a nag. It's, no, okay, fine. And I'll just do a quick maybe 1-page outline of the story, and then get back to the project at hand. And that was really how Tomb Yarns and Butterflies started. I was writing another book, and this whole story premise came up. I said, all right, let me just write it and get it done. But it was so interesting that I couldn't get back to the other story, and I had to pursue that one.
So talking about your other stories, let's look at. So you got Sepia Blue, Night Warden,
Yes.
the John Kane
Yeah.
series, Chronicles of Modern, and Warriors of the Way. Let's just give a brief overview of these books.
Wow, that's a lot of books. Okay.
Well, you're a busy man.
Yes, I've tried to stay busy. The Warriors of the Way is the first series I ever wrote. I cringe when I read that because I was just so. I had just started, and so it was so complicated and convoluted. But it was good to get it out early because it paved the way for me to write tighter stories that made a lot more sense, that had a smaller cast of characters. And Warriors of the Way is basically a character being thrown into an alternate world that has a large emphasis on martial arts, and it's basically just saving everything. But it's a great story, and people who read it really like it. But I can't read it. I cringe when I read it.
I think that's the same for any writer or any creator. They always look at their earliest work and like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, and I always want to go back and like rewrite it and fix it. Like, oh no, that could have been said so much better, and I could have changed this, and I could add that. So I just try to stay away from the spiritual warriors for that reason, because I know if given enough time, I'll go back, and they've all been edited by the same editor I have now. Well, I'll go back and rewrite it, and it's like, okay, we could fix this, and we could add this, and we can make this tighter. And no, let's not do that. So
I'm exactly the same. Whenever I look at the first screenplay I ever wrote, I look at it and think, oh, they were trying to like pull off a heist at the Vatican? No. What were you thinking?
What were you thinking? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's usually what runs in my head. What were you thinking when you wrote this?
Past Orlando, what were you on?
Yeah, that's a recurring theme. Like, what were you thinking when you wrote this? Really, come on. So then the Sepia Blue, which I still have to finish because there's 2 books left in that series, and I did promise my readers I would finish it at some point.
George R.R. Martin has been making that promise for a long time. I think they can be.
George R.R. hasn't written anything else. That's the problem. If he would write other things, I think his fans wouldn't be as angry with him. Yeah. Because it's one thing to say it's going to be finished soon and then write other stories that are just as engaging. But it's another thing to say it's going to be finished soon and then just focus on the TV show or other things. And that's what people are upset with, with George R.R. He kills main characters, which I don't understand, but he does it. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I kind of like that, though. I kind of like they kills main characters because I've consumed so much media. I keep on talking about this on the show that I'm tired of the cliches, and I'm tired of. I like it when things change it up.
He really changed it up. He added that to the genre, because before then main characters were inviolate. You couldn't touch them. And he just said, no, everybody can die. Anyone and everyone can die. And that's what he started doing.
And everyone that ever read a single thing that he's ever written became very afraid.
Oh, yes. And that's good. You want your readers to kind of be, what's going to happen? Is it really going to happen? The only thing is that he's lost the momentum on that because he's taking so long between his books. Yeah. But other than that, he's an amazing writer. I mean, he writes tomes. He doesn't write just books. He writes epics. And so if he could increase his productivity in terms of the gaps between books, he doesn't really have to write another book if he doesn't want to. He's completely set for life at this point. Yeah, he's good. But as a writer, we need to write. And so I'm sure he wants to write, but maybe he's just,
Well, just because the book's not out yet doesn't mean he's not writing. He's just...
exactly.
He's just... It's going to be a big book. He's got, like, people that know a lot more about the lore at this point that he's got to consult with.
Well, yeah. And there's always the danger of, will it be as good as the last book when you start... When you get to that,
hype is the killer of anything remotely good.
Yeah, and that's why I like Stephen King. Even I don't read horror anymore because he just keeps putting book after book after book. Yeah. He doesn't really care. It's like, I'm just gonna keep doing this. And so,
you know what? I'm gonna do another book. It's also gonna be set in Maine, and the main character is also going to be a recovering alcoholic. Deal with it, mofos.
And deal with it. He just he has a very blue collar, if you can call it that, way of being about writing. He'll just write. Every year he's putting out a few books, like 1 or 2 books. I mean, he doesn't have to. King doesn't have to write another book in his life if he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
But he does it, and so, that's maybe George R.R. could go sit down with King a few times and kind of get that ethic, that work ethic, or that method out.
And what I love about Stephen King as well is that I think he charges, like, is it $1 for like film students to adapt his stories? Like
$1.
He could charge thousands, if not millions.
He could charge thousands and millions if he wanted. Put his name on it. Yeah.
But he doesn't care about the money.
He charges $1.
That's a really good thing to do. It's really good as a screenwriter and as a someone who's into film. That's a really good thing that he does, even though he doesn't agree. And the great thing also I like, he doesn't always like the adaptations though. And if he doesn't like it, he says so.
Yes, and that's great. I think he should be able to say that was crap. I hated that adaptation.
Fuck you, Kubrick.
But, exactly. But the thing is that he's generous about it, and that's really important for me as a writer. Is that he gives back. He'll answer emails. He'll answer snail mail. He'll actually write back. I know countless stories of writers who started writing from a mail they got from Stephen King, who told them that work was really good. I think if you really, keep at it, you'll be a good writer. And they took that to heart and started writing.
And he does it with other authors as well. I remember what he said about Stephanie Meyer in the Twilight series. He said, like, Harry Potter is a story about, like, magic and fantasy and finding yourself and good versus evil. Twilight is about how important it is to have a boyfriend.
Yeah.
He pulls no punches.
No. Yeah, and he's very generous and he's very straight. And that's key. That's very key.
I think it is very key. Now, before we go any further, it's time to plug something. Do you want to learn?
Go for it.
Yeah, I will do. Do you want to learn how to make comics? You're looking for something to help you get started, like, say, a course taught by one of the best in the biz? Well, you're in luck, because Neil Gibson, editor and head writer at TPub Comics, who brought you titles like Twisted Dark, Tabitha, and Theatric, is doing just that. Neil's offering a free webinar for anyone who wants to learn the TPub method for making comics. If you like the webinar, you can sign on to his web course and use the code CAPE, that's capital C, capital A, capital P, capital E, to get you a 5% discount. That's Charlie, Alpha, Papo, Echo, 5%. You'll learn everything from how to write a comic script all the way through to how to market your final product. So even if you can't draw, this course is going to help you break into the comic industry. So sign up for the webinar at tpub.co.uk/free-webinar or use the link in the show notes and use the code CAPE to sign up for the course. Now, back to the show proper. One thing I do want to talk about is you set up a Twitter for Montague and Strong.
Yes.
Like the individual characters.
Yeah, I haven't been as diligent with it as I should have been because I've been busy writing, but they each have their own accounts. But more importantly, when I first started it, I had them tweet my sister, and she thought these were real people because I had them speaking as Monty and Simon, and completely pranked her for a good day or two until I finally told her, no, they're all me. She was like, what? So
obviously, they're very strong characters and have very strong voices as characters. If they're able to fool someone who knows you.
Well, I had them even talking amongst each other, like having a conversation between them and like talking about my sister, like, who is this person and why is she tweeting us? And they were like, oh, what's going on? So it was fantastic. It was great.
No, it's great. Yeah. I like when characters. I've seen like smaller things do that. I've seen a couple like web series do like Twitter stuff and Instagram stuff, but it's very rare that you get books that you do that. Yeah. I like that because it's, we live in a multimedia world. It's good to get the word out there, and it also helps inform people's ideas of these characters. It makes it become more real and more living and more breathing, I think.
Exactly. It lends them another dimension, and that really fleshes them out as individuals. And so you start following these tweets and these Twitters, and it's like, wait a minute, who's doing the talking? And is it really? And then so they come across as real people. I just have to do one for Peaches now because Peaches needs his own.
I love that you call like this hellhound, like the offspring of Cerberus, Peaches. I love it.
Yeah, because everyone's expecting it be like, Thunder or, Maleficent or something really, and it's, Peaches. Why not?
Yeah. It goes back to Harry Potter when he's like the giant three-headed dog. What did you call him, Hagrid? I called him Fluffy.
Yeah, things like that. And so, let's see, where did I get the inspiration for Peaches? I got the inspiration for Peaches from Andrew Vox, actually, who is a very, he writes really dark detective stories. I don't think he's still writing, but his stories are really dark. But he had this great dog that was like a beast of a dog, and he called it Pansy. It was fantastic. I said, oh, that is just perfect. It was like this huge mastiff type dog that was just a monster beast, and he'd call it Pansy. It was Pansy or something like that. And I thought that was just perfect. And so if you have the pup of a service and he's a hellhound, what could you call it? I think Peaches is perfect.
Because I mean, like, if you call him like as a Thunder or Grimdark or something like that,
Yeah.
then it's just like, yeah. And you can't take a dog like that out to the park. Like, go on, Grimdark, get the ball, good boy.
Yeah. Exactly right.
You can't do that. But Peaches,
You can't.
Absolutely. That's good.
So, but Peaches is just such a it throws people off when they first read that his name is Peach. It's like, what, really? Peaches? Really? Yeah, Peaches.
Yeah,
and then Simon keeps reiterating it because they call him creature, beast. All he says his name is, his thing is he always emphasizes Peach's name. It's like, it's Peaches, okay? His name is Peaches, not creature, not beast, not, hell dog. It's Peaches.
And that's what I like about it, because it's a combination of like this fantasy stuff and the urban stuff, because the urban reality stuff, there are lots of people in these books have real names. Like Tristan Montague, you could have called him like Esophagus Eldritch or something like that, to make it like a really old-timey weird name. But no, it's just called Tristan Montague. I mean, it's a little bit old-timey, I guess, but I know people with last name called Montagues. There's people out there called Tristan. It's a pretty innocuous name. But then you've got things like the gun that Simon's got, Grim Whisper is such a cool name.
Right.
And the Ebon
the Grim Whisper is a great name, and the Ebon Soul. So it's a mix. I think for me, when I wrote the Spiritual Warriors, I had all those names, all those fantastic fantasy names. And what ends up happening is that you just end up confusing everyone, kind of trying to keep track of all the names and all the characters. You've included
like a glossary and an appendix in the book just to give you...
I have, it helps. I heard it helps.
I mean, with all the characters and with all the organizations like Sunatran and stuff like that. Well, I mean, it does help, but if you pay attention like I did...
You catch it, you do. Because there aren't that many, and it's woven into the story in such a way that it's natural. So it's not, the information doesn't come at you from left field or from a place you don't expect. It comes naturally into the story, so you remember it. But I wanted them to have very easy names to remember. Like, that's why if you read No God is Safe, you'll find out why Simon calls Monty Montague, Monty, because he's just like, hey, Montague is just too long. I'll call you Monty, fine. And so it's it's nothing out of the world. But
I imagine Tristan initially was not too pleased with that.
He was not because it's his name, and he's English, and if you're gonna call him, his name is Tristan, not Monty. So
how dare you?
Exactly, and it's very simple. The names are simple because it's easy to remember, and so it's things like that.
It's like, again, it's like with naming dogs. Like in the real world, you don't give it like, you name your dog like Tiberius Brutimus Maximus. You give it like Fluffy or Banjo or whatever, because that's an easy name for the dog to remember. And
exactly. And that's you want your readers to have a memorable story. And so when you give easy names, it makes a story. They can kind of bypass having to worry about all the names and get into the story itself. Which is what makes it important.
It reminds me of this really shit Harry Potter fanfic that you might have heard of called My Immortal, where the main character...
I heard about this. Yeah, I heard about this. It was really bad.
The main character is called Ebony Raven Darkness Raven Way or some bullshit like that.
Yeah, why?
Because she's a vampire and she's really gothic.
See, I have vampires in my book. But my vampires, the ones that Simon interacts with, come from a lineage from a Japanese lineage. So even the names that are longer, Simon has a habit of shortening names anyway. So Michiko he just calls her Chi, which she really hates, but she can't kill him because he's immortal, but she could hurt him. But he'll call her
But she
Chi
won't
anyway.
because she likes him.
Yeah, she does. And so she allows him to call her Chi. But her name is Michiko, which is still a simple name, but it's easier to refer to her as Chi, and readers remember Chi. Like when my readers, when they refer to her, they don't go Michiko. They go Chi, we need to see more of her, we need to, things like that. So, yeah,
It's good to help us connect because I mean, like, again, going back to Game of Thrones,
yeah.
there's a million and one characters in that story, and a lot of
Oh,
them you can
jeez.
remember very well. But a lot of
Yeah.
time they give the names, you're just like, who are you
Who?
again? You're
Who's
that
that?
guy.
Yeah,
And it's difficult. Like, oh, I
it
remember
is.
that guy, that one guy from that one scene from season one. Oh, now he's dead. Well,
Oh, he's dead now. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the thing with that is that you don't get attached. That's the only
No.
thing with Martin is that you don't get attached. So, and that's good and bad because that means you have to have other characters that people can get attached to, but also for continuity, it's tough because if you kill a lot of characters, it's hard to keep the continuity going because now you need something much larger than the characters, which he does pull off, but you need something that's greater than the characters. And most stories are character driven. And if you're busy killing off characters, now the story itself has to carry everything.
Yeah, very few characters, very few name characters at least die in this book, the Two Mountain
Yeah,
Butterflies. Which
yeah,
I
very
kind of like, because again, you have connections with them. And I mean, the
sure.
character of Roxanne, put out the red light. I
Yeah,
have to say
of
that every single time you say the word Roxanne. We don't meet her
course.
for that long a
And-
time, but then when
yeah,
stuff happens later on in the book, won't spoil it here, we're glad that
yeah,
she comes through it.
yes, yes. Roxanne is, every time I hear that name, I just hear, Sting.
Yeah.
So it's like, so
Roxanne!
yeah, of course. And I grew up with the Police, so
Yeah.
and I have a lot of like
Good
my
song, but
readers.
they ruined the name. I mean,
Yeah, I know, forever from that.
between them and the Steve Martin movie, like,
Oh, jeez, yeah, it was bad. That's it for that name.
yeah.
But I have a lot of Easter eggs and stuff that I hide in the books that my readers love picking out too. Things like Roxanne and certain lyrics and things or references to other
Is
stuff
he a
that.
wizard? No, you're thinking
Yeah,
of Chicago.
exactly. Yeah, things.
Yeah.
And if you don't know Harry Dresden, it's just another reference. But if you know Dresden, you go, "Oh, I know who he's talking about," and so it adds another depth to the story. And to certain readers, that's huge. They go, "Yes, I know what he's referencing," or
Yeah.
things like that. So
That's
yeah,
another thing. That's the thing I don't like about actually talking about names. I don't like about uh, Stormfront and the Dresden novel. Just because like Harry Copperfield Blackstone Dresden, like no.
yeah.
First of all, like several magicians. Second of all, we've already got a wizard called Harry. His name is goddamn Mr. Harry Potter. Thank you very much.
Yes, yes. Although I think Dresden was before Potter, so you're gonna
Really?
have to you have to speak Butcher on that. Yeah, I think Dresden
I'll
came
do
out
some
before.
research. I'm not convinced.
I'm pretty sure Dresden was out before Potter, except that Rowling
Yeah.
he
Okay, well, they're very different
made
stories in
Harry
any
cute.
case.
Yeah.
Very different.
And they're very different wizards too. I
Yeah.
mean, you're going from a child who becomes an adult to an adult who's just dealing with a lot of drama. So it's different.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Dresden famously got a TV series that I have tried to watch twice
Yes.
and failed to watch twice
Yeah.
because it's not
Can't
very.
can't watch the series. It doesn't do any justice to the book.
I can't even get past the first episode. It's like I want to like this. I like the main guy in it, but
Yeah, two different entities. If you can approach the series without the book, maybe. But if you've read any of the books, you have to have amnesia, some severe memory loss to
that's
be
the
able
thing
to
is.
appreciate that.
That's the thing is though, because the first time I tried to watch it, I hadn't read the book. The second time I
Yeah,
watched it, I just read the book, and
yeah,
I couldn't enjoy it either time. So obviously the
yeah.
series is just not meant for me. But here's the
Yeah,
thing.
that series isn't meant for many people. I think they did a real disservice to Jim Butcher with that series because the books are really good. But I don't know what happened or who. Maybe he didn't have creative control in that situation, but it doesn't come even close to the stories in the book. And then aside from the Harry, the casting was off.
Yeah,
So
like that's the whole thing. But the reason why I bring that up is because in the future, do we see perhaps a Montague and Strong TV show or movie, perhaps?
That'd be great. I'm willing. I'm open to it. You
Yeah,
just,
I think it would work better as a movie than a TV
I think
show.
it's better as a movie. Yeah, I think it would be great as a movie, and just gotta have the right casting. My
Yeah.
readers cast it all the time. They want Ryan Reynolds as Simon,
Oh yeah.
and and they want, what do they tell me? Oh, Liam Neeson would be a great Montague.
He would. He
Just,
looks a bit like him
uh,
on the cover. You
on
got
the
these two guys
covers,
here,
yeah.
and he's
So
got.
and they kind of have that feel that they would be kind of polar opposites. So it would work. It would be interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. But and of the future, obviously, you're gonna continue the books, though, right?
Yeah, I'm on book. I just finished book 5. I'm starting book 6 in a few weeks. So yes.
Yeah. So you're gonna keep going with this. We're not gonna see the end to them anytime soon.
No, because they're evergreen in the sense that there's always something that could happen in terms, because it's a detective series and there's always an incident that needs some kind of attention, and so they can just keep going indefinitely,
Yeah.
which is fun.
Absolutely. As I talk about detective stories, as I said, you can always tell more stories. But speaking of stories, I always like to ask this question when it comes to writers: what's the
Yes.
one story you want to tell that you haven't told yet?
Huh.
Take
I
all the
don't know
time you
yet.
need.
I don't know yet because the stories come to me, and every story that I've written so far has been a new story. So when I started Wander, which is actually set, what's happened with Montague and Strong is that the universe of Montague and Strong has expanded. And so Wander is actually set in the Montague and Strong world, but it's a completely tangent story.
This is part of the Night
And
Warden series,
that's
right?
the Night Warden series. And so that one is the story of a mage who's dying
Oh,
and has to deal with coming to grips with that and an incident that's occurring. And so, and taking on an apprentice who is kind of
oh shit! Got to pass on this
reluctant
knowledge.
to be one.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Damn.
Yeah,
I
so
just, I
he's
just,
dealing
you
with
just got
and
me
dying
hooked
at
on
the
the
same.
Montague and Strong books. I can't go. I got so many books I have to
Yeah.
read, guys. Honestly. Ugh.
And then get all the short stories. The short stories are a lot of fun, but I haven't. Every story that I come across that I haven't written is, when I start a story, it's a story that I haven't written.
Mm,
Not to say it's a new story that hasn't been told. It just hasn't been told from my perspective. I don't think there are any new stories. I think there's just different ways of telling,
absolutely.
the same stories over and over. Just everyone's story is unique, but the general story, someone has told it. You just have to do it your way.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
but another way of telling a story is via the method of audiobooks. You've got a few audiobooks.
Yes. I have audiobooks for No God is Safe, Two Meows and Butterflies, and Full Moon Howls coming out April 3rd. And the other books will probably come out subsequently from that.
Cool. So, I mean, who does the narration for that?
Kevin, I want to say Kevin Tomlinson, but it's a very well-known narrator.
Because I listened to an
So
excerpt on Amazon because I used to have an Audible account anyway,
yes,
and he does an okay job with the British accent, switching in between the American and the English. It's okay.
he's okay. Yeah, it's hard to do a British accent if you're not English.
Yeah.
No God is Safe is actually done by an English person. So two
Oh.
different groups. So the short story has an audiobook, and that's done by an American and an Englishman. So that's really fun because when you listen to it, you really get a feel for Monty. Um, but that's two different groups. So Two Mirrors and Butterflies is one person doing both voices. No God is Safe is two people doing each voice. So Simon is played by one person in the narration, and the Montague parts are a different actor doing his voice.
Oh, see, that's because I've listened to a few audiobooks, and it's rare that you
Yeah,
see that. That's more like a radio play. But I always
sure.
appreciate a narrator who puts the time into actually putting on a different voice and actually
Yes.
giving a damn. Because there's this one audiobook that I listened to briefly. I think it's called Gridlinked, based
Hmm.
on this sci-fi novel. I think it was Neil Asher. Heard a lot about it.
Right.
And it's fine, I guess, but I really couldn't get into it. It felt like a very
Yeah.
dry and bland way of telling this rather interesting story.
Hmm.
But conversely, I've listened to two audiobooks by this very famous British author slash video game critic, Ben Yahtzee Croshaw. Don't know if you've heard of him. He's written books like called Mogworld and Jam and We'll Save the Galaxy for Food. The very satirical, very fun
Douglas Adams type stuff, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And he does his own audiobooks, and he's very good at the voice acting, and it really makes his characters come alive. There's different accents and different inflections, and that really does help when you're listening. Because otherwise, you sort of become when you're listening, you get into a bit of a hypnotic daze when you listen to it.
And it can become monotone, and you'll lose the story. You'll get hypnotized. Yeah.
You wake up like 5 minutes later, like what? And then great, I've got to scroll back and listen to it all over again.
My short stories are done by John Logsdon, and I don't know the British gentleman's name, the English gentleman's name actually, but John is fantastic as Simon. And so he does all the inflections, he does pauses. He's really not just reading story, he's telling you a story. Like you're sitting there and he's just, okay, let me tell you what happened. And so it's a story you're listening to. And he just happens to have his friend who can do all the English parts. That's what it feels like. And I've heard audiobooks where it's actually read as it's written, and it becomes this monotone, and all of a sudden you're falling asleep because it's just.
And then Harry opened the door. He gasped in surprise. It was Dumbledore naked.
Exactly. And so it's like, I don't have time to read. I don't have time to hear things like that. It'll put me to sleep.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's always good to do that. But it's good that you've got audiobooks out because it shows that it's another way of getting people, because some people can't be bothered to read, you lazy bastards.
Yeah, I don't understand, but yes, I get it. Some people just can't read it, so they'll listen to it. And I guess some people are just very busy and prefer to hear things as opposed to reading it. But I've always been a reader ever since I was very young. And so for me, reading is very important.
Same. Whenever my parents and my sister were out, in the living room watching the football, I was up in my room, like knee deep in my Harry Potter and stuff. Yeah. Just reading that all the time, and that's what I love. But another thing you love is martial arts.
Yes, I've been practicing martial arts now for 30 years.
Oh, Christ! So let's hear all about it, because my knowledge of martial arts is limited to like 3 lessons I had when I was a kid and any Bruce Lee movies that are out there. That's all I know.
That's most people, so don't feel bad. I've been practicing karate for 30 years. I started when I was 20, so I'm 50 now, and I trained without teaching for about 20 years, and I started teaching about 10 years ago. So a lot of years of karate. It's part of who I am. And and
it's informed your writing as well to a certain degree.
It really is, because it informs the fight scenes. I do have a lot of fight scenes. They're not martial arts fight scenes. It's interesting because even though Spiritual Warrior was a lot of martial arts fight scenes, the fight scenes in Montague and Strong aren't really martial arts fight scenes. They're fight scenes that occur, but the martial arts, my experience and my background, and it allows me to make the fight scenes seem, from what I'm told, very realistic.
It's a rhythm of movement.
The rhythm of movement. It's more like a dance. You can kind of see. You get to see what's happening, and you get the timing and what's happening in the fight scene. So it really lends a certain dimension to the fight scene. And that's the experience in martial arts. Because also I'd have to find someone who did this stuff and ask them, how would you do this and how would you do that? And I don't have to do that because that's my own experience.
Yeah, it's good to talk with other people. Otherwise, you don't want to be trapped in your own bubble. So, I mean, say how long you've been doing it for. What grade would you say you are? I know there's different.
I'm what's considered a sandan, which is a 3rd-degree black belt. Ooh. But my style, the style I practice, promotes very slowly. So I've been a 3rd-degree black belt since 1999. Oh, wow. so it moves really slow, my style.
It's slow but effective.
It's very effective, and thankfully I've never had to really use it, at least not in the last 10, 15 years. But also, I train very regularly, so I'm a deterrent in and of itself, because most people don't want to mess around with me, so it's good.
Oh dear God, he knows martial arts, guys. Back off.
Well, you don't need to advertise it. You just have to. If you walk around a certain way, when we teach the kids, it's what you see right away after like a few months is that their level of confidence changes, the way they carry their body changes, and so that sends an unspoken message that you shouldn't really mess with this child because they have some kind of training. And the same thing in adults too. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's good to have that knowledge, I guess, but also it's good just for the
Yeah.
exercise, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's great exercise. It's like, I mean, in addition to the fact that I go to the gym regularly anyway, the martial arts helps considerably
Mm.
because I spend a lot of hours just sitting down. So I get up and stretch and do some movements, and I can get back into the writing. Because one thing that I have seen in my few years as a full-time, not full-time, but really focused writer, is that a lot of writers, authors are in horrible shape because they don't take care of their bodies. Because they spend all day writing, but they don't like go to the gym or go out for a walk or anything that to move their body. So they're writing, but after a while they have horrible back problems and they can't really move. They have no mobility, and so you have to take care of yourself too.
Absolutely. I mean, that's I mean, J.R.R. Tolkien always like went for walks and stuff. You don't have
Yes,
to go to the gym. You don't need to
right,
do
exactly.
martial arts. You just need to get
No,
out once in a while.
get out, just get outside. I know a lot of authors just don't leave the house for days,
Yeah.
so you got to get out and at least realize that there's an outside. Go out there. You can't live in your brain, in your head, in your created world all the time. You've got to get out. Like Tolkien used to go out with C.S. Lewis, and they were part of this group, and they would just go out and go for walks and have conversations or arguments. And but that's the key. There was the camaraderie, the being able to get out and enjoy other things besides the writing.
Yeah, it's good to get. So, I mean, what got you into it in the first place? Was it just like a casual thing, or was it something you always wanted to do?
Well, I've always written ever since I was very young. I used to keep journals. And then when I started Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, I used to be the dungeon master. So I had to
Okay.
create basically scenarios for them. But a lot of it was invented on the fly. It was spontaneous. But I'd write down stories and scenarios for them. And then figure around 2010, I started writing stories and getting ideas for stories, but I didn't get serious about it until about 2012. And that's when I started the Spiritual Warriors. And that had a few fits and starts before the final iteration of it. And then after that, I just kept saying, okay, I'm going to keep at this and try to get better. And I started studying craft books and attending seminars and really trying to say there's a way to get better at writing. I want to find it because there's got to be a way. You're not born an excellent writer. You've got to study. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, and I just like that these two things have informed each other, and it's made you a more complete person. Would you say?
Yeah, it really has because I mean, to this day, I'm still studying. I'm still reading craft books and still, you never get to the point where you arrive. As a writer, I think there's always room for improvement. There's always a better way to say something or to convey an idea or a thought.
Yeah.
And so
We're always learning.
you always have to be open to learning. And when a writer or any person, any creative person says, that's it, I don't need to learn anymore, that's usually when stagnation hits and things start to suffer. So you should always be in the mindset of, I'm a student. I'm always learning. And I got that also from the martial arts, because in martial arts, you never arrive. You never hit a pinnacle and say, that's it, I'm done. There's always something that can be fixed and adjusted or polished. So it's very similar, those two worlds, to writing and martial arts, that you're always a student. You're always learning more. And it just takes time. You have to be willing to put in the time. That's the key.
Yeah, patience.
Yeah, it takes patience, because when you first write that first book, you think, I'm going to write it, it's going to go out there, and instant bestseller, I'm going to be, and no, that's not usually what happens. No, and you have to keep at it, and you have to keep at it and keep at it, and eventually you create this following, and there's a momentum, and then all of a sudden, yes, people start saying, hey, listen, I heard about your book, or I read your book, or this person talked about this book, but that takes years. You have to be willing to put in years and years and years.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
then, when you put the work in, it pays off, as it
It
has
really
done in this great book, Singing of Butterflies, and this great series of books that you've done.
Yes, it does pay off, because now people who read Singing and Butterflies and then read the series, when they finish the series or what it's up to now, they go, wow, I wonder what else he's written. And then they go back and they discover that I've written like 15 other books, and they go, oh my God, I didn't realize you had written so many books, and then they go
Where
back.
have you been all my life?
Yeah, and they read everything. And it's like, wow, I didn't realize that you had written so much. I just thought you had Montague and Strong. And they go, no, it's incredible. And so it does pay off.
You've been busy.
If you have that. I've been busy, and usually what happens is most creators are busy in obscurity, and you have to be for a while. But then once you get discovered, all that previous work gets discovered as well. So if you have a large backlist for authors, when you get discovered with whatever book is the one that breaks out, like for me, it was Tumors and Butterflies. After Tumors and Butterflies, things really started to open up and get momentum. But prior to that, all those books prior to Tumors and Butterflies all of a sudden get recognition, or people start looking at that because of that one book. And so you become an overnight success that's been added for like 8-10 years. So it's usually the way it is.
Yeah, I think it's turned out pretty goddamn well. Now, before we wrap up, there's something else I want to talk about. Now, it's not necessarily related to you, Orlando, but it's something that I've talked about on the show before, and I felt it's good to bookend it. See, several episodes ago, I made note of a truly horrendous trailer for a movie. The movie in question was Peter Rabbit. And this is related to you because it's based on a book and stuff, and that's how I'm going to link the two in my mind. That makes sense to me.
Okay.
I fucking hated the trailer, Orlando.
I didn't like the trailer. For me, I think I didn't like it because for me, and maybe it's just me, but I have very fond memories of Peter Rabbit growing up as a kid.
Same.
As a child.
I love Beatrix Potter.
And so the trailer, I get the CGI, and you have to kind of do that now because of that's the way movies are done. But I don't see that movie doing well at all. Did it even come out?
It's come out here in the UK, and it
hasn't come out here. I don't think yet.
It's the thing, though. I complained about this movie in the trailer several times about how I thought it was misrepresentative of the original stories, how it was crap, how it came from Sony, which in my eyes makes it awful. But I thought, you know what? It's not really fair to judge a movie based on its marketing. You've got to go. You got to go and watch the movie itself.
Sure.
And yesterday, I did just that. I saw Peter Rabbit. And, well, you know what, Orlando? You know what? Surprisingly, it was actually fucking horrible!
Yeah.
It was...
Why would that be surprising?
Oh my...
That bad?
Okay. I want to say...
Yes.
If this was an entirely original movie, if it wasn't based on a beloved British classic, then I would like it. Yeah. But you know what? I can't even say that. Because these characters, the way they present them, I fucking hate them. I fucking like. There's so many things. I can't do a full review of it right here and now because we're talking about you. But I'm just gonna give a brief overview of why this movie is fucking shit. It's shit on toast. So it starts up much like the books do, in big air quotes. Peter Rabbit, he sees Mr. McGregor's garden. He's like, oh, I'm going to steal vegetables and stuff from that. Mr. McGregor, played by Sam Neill, and he looks pretty much like the real deal, and Peter Rabbit sounds like the real deal. Doesn't help that the movie starts with a narration saying, this is a story about a rabbit with a little blue jacket and no pants. Fuck you. And
but it insults your intelligence from the beginning.
It insults your intelligence from the beginning, and it basically sets up this whole dynamic where Mr. McGregor dies, his great nephew, played by Domhnall Gleeson, who is too good for this movie, moves in, and
wants to take over. They have some kind of altercation. They don't get along or something.
Yeah, but here's the thing. This is he just wants to sell the house and move on with his life. And these rabbits and all the other animals come in and like trash his house and steal stuff from his garden. And I keep thinking like, wow, they're kind of bastards because they need to eat, but at the same time they're stealing stuff from his property and he's got a right to defend it. But then there's this character played by Rose Byrne called Bee, which is an obvious reference to Beatrix Potter, which makes me furious.
That's
she's a nice person, but she's so condescending and hippie-ish in her mannerisms. Because, she's like, as soon as Domhnall Gleeson arrives, she's like, oh, we all share our land around here because animals, we're borrowing the land from them. So I just let them run wherever they want. Doesn't matter if they destroy my property or steal your food, We're just It's okay. And it's like, okay, so I guess in the Lake District, property rights don't exist. No! I'm sorry, no. But then, here's the thing. We learn more about young Mr. McGregor, because he's not the real
Right.
Mr. McGregor, but he learned none of them. And he got fired from his job at a toy shop in Harrods in London. And Rose Byrne, and they sort of have a bit of a romance, and she asks him what he most liked about working the toy shop. And he says, honestly, very sincerely, I loved being helpful. I loved making a child's day better by giving them the right toy, or helping a parent or a grandparent with just a few questions find something that inspires someone. And yeah, I like things in the place and being a bit, uptight and stuff, but I also liked helping people. I sympathize with the antagonist of this movie far more than Peter Rabbit. Peter Rabbit in this movie is a fucking arsehole, played by someone who I believe is a genuinely talented man, but too often comes across like a fucking arsehole, James Corden.
Oh, yes.
And this, I could go on and on about there's so many ways where this movie is backwards and a bastardization of the classic stories, and just a horrible modern update in the worst ways. Occasionally, there's a kind of a funny line. It's usually ruined in the next scene and the next sentence. And these characters are utterly unlikable. And one of the worst part of it is, it's got a bit of a controversy actually. There's Mr. McGregor admits to Rose Byrne that he has a allergy to blackberries, and Peter Rabbit responds when he overhears this by saying, "Blackberries? Oh, everyone nowadays has got an allergy," and it's so weird and condescending and kind of
strange, yeah.
And then Benjamin Bunny points out, well, people do actually have legitimate medical conditions. And Peter Rabbit says, oh, yes, absolutely. No, I completely get that. I wouldn't want to get any letters. And he stares at the screen for like 10 seconds.
Oh, wow. So it's a fourth wall break. Really?
Oh, and it's so uncomfortable. And it's so crap.
Jeez.
But then later, he takes blackberries and he fires some into Mr. McGregor's mouth, who promptly goes into anaphylactic shock and has to stab himself with an EpiPen.
So completely contradicting what he had just said earlier.
Yeah, Sony apologized, but I mean,
then does it? Does exactly what they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
And there's a bit where later, like the whole movie, it seems like animals can talk, but the humans can't understand them. But then there's a bit that's just for convenience sake, where Peter Rabbit apologizes later to Mr. McGregor and stuff, and then he has to convince Rose Byrne that actually they can talk and that they did all these things, and it's just...
Oh, that's a little far. Yeah, it's stretching it, really.
The trailers were right. This is a horrible movie. There were times when I had to stop myself from groaning out loud because there were children in the audience, and I didn't want to ruin it for them. But at the same time,
sad part, that's the sad part, that there were kids that are watching this and thinking that's Peter Rabbit, as opposed to being exposed to the books first.
No, and
that's the sad part.
There are times when they use the classic animation and like the classic styles of, and it's actually kind of nice, and it's like a constant reminder of like, hey, this really lovely, innocent, well thought out, creative thing from long ago. Here's a brief reminder of it before we return to Mrs. Tiggywinkle, voiced by fucking Sia. Like, I have nothing against the Sia. I have nothing against her whatsoever. I don't even care about her that much, to be honest. But you know what? If I was in charge of casting this movie, I would not cast Sia.
Yeah. So, this is the danger when you take a beloved property and try to modernize it. Like, what would be like when Jackson did Lord of the Rings, which I think he did a fair job, but the danger is doing that. You're taking something that's beloved by so many people, and then you're trying to bring it to modern sensibilities. And some things just don't translate well. Like, I don't see the Peter Rabbit story translating to modern without some serious changes, and you lose a lot of the original. Yeah. That's the thing.
But I think the original could work. I think I watched when I was a kid. There was a TV show based on a lot of the stories that I really liked as a kid. And it's like, you don't have to modernize. You don't have to make it cool and snappy with pop songs and like wisecracking and celebrity voices. You don't have to.
You don't need to.
Because kids... I can't believe I keep on after saying this on the show. Kids are not stupid. They can enjoy subtle, well thought out stories. And
they don't need all that. Those are all that's just window dressing. They don't need that.
No.
They don't need any of that.
And you know what, kids, here's the problem. The only problem with kids is that they're not going to demand something better because nine
They
times out of
can't.
10 they don't know anything
They don't
better.
know to demand something better, right? They won't know.
Which is,
Exactly. That's the problem.
because I mean, you're a father, right? So you
Yes,
want your kids watching something good.
of course. I want them to watch something that's quality and something that they can appreciate, so that later on they can say, as they get older, those were good, experiences. You don't want them watching something that's crap.
The same way when we were kids, when we read something, we read Beaches Potter or Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings or Game of Thrones or whatever,
yeah,
it informs us as kids, and it's
sure.
it,
I used to read Tolkien. I used to read Lord of the Rings every summer. Every summer, I would start my summer with the Lord of the Rings. And when I got older, I'd actually read the Silmarillion. But I read every summer. I would read the Lord of the Rings every summer because I realized how awesome it was. And when you're exposed to writing like that, or let's say later on, let's say you're exposed to Terry Pratchett, you start to become discerning because you realize, wow, there are writers out there who can do this so well, who are so masterful, that you start realizing, I don't want to read anything that's not on that level, just as good or better. That's what I need. I want to read something that's subpar to that. I want to read something that's just as good or better than what I just read. Although it's hard to beat Tolkien and Pratchett. Those are really high, those are
dream
high
team.
bars to set. That's really hard to beat.
Yeah. And
But
if you like crap, if you like
you know,
bad shit, you know what? That's fine. If you're an
yeah,
adult, because we know better and we can deal with crap.
exactly.
Before I
But as a
before,
child,
yeah,
no, you want them reading the best. Like I had my kids read the Chronicles of Narnia. As soon as they learn to read,
brilliant.
let's go. You start reading C.S. Lewis. Before they could read, I read it to them. And then once they could read, I got them to read this. And then I would get them like other books like that. So I wanted them to have a foundation of amazing, fantastic stories by masters of the craft. And later on, if they wanted to choose to read fluff or something that's just whatever, they could. But they have the distinction, which is the key. They know this is great writing, and I'm just going to read this because it's not great writing, but I just want to read this for the sake of reading it. But I know what great writing is, and that's the key. I want them to be able to know the difference, and that's important. That's as readers and as writers, you need to know the difference. What's great writing and what's not. So,
When I think of all the hard work some people put into animated films, like Kubo and the
yeah,
Two Strings came out a few years ago,
yes,
a beautiful movie,
yes, that
interesting,
was
fun,
so wonderful to
funny
watch. Yeah.
movie.
And that's hard. That was a stop animation movie. So you could imagine every motion had to be shot individually. That is a hard movie to make.
And
And it looked fantastic.
and everyone I asked about it, when I said, "Oh, I saw this brilliant movie," no one had heard of it. No one had
Yeah,
heard of
because
it.
I don't understand why. The same thing happened get notoriety as it should have. It was just a beautiful movie to watch. I think I've watched it twice now. Just to look at the movie, not even the story, but just the cinematography, just to look at the images because it's so well done. The colors, and it's just an amazing movie to see. And some movies are just like that. But then it's really well told too. And not many people. It didn't get a lot of press here.
I think it's just, as adults, we have a responsibility, whether you have kids or not, to take your kids to see good movies, to
Oh
make
yes,
good movies, and to
sure.
highlight the importance, and just to try for their sake. Because one
Yeah,
day
they're the
they will
next
grow up and
generation.
they will start creating stories that we
Sure.
will enjoy and that we will consume. And we owe it to them and to ourselves to give them the best.
Yes, because you have to always think, and as a creative, I've had conversations with other creators about this. Like, what you're creating now doesn't last. It shouldn't just last for now. You have to think about what a legacy means, and so create something that's going to last, that's going to span not just your generation, but the next generation, and hopefully the next, and hopefully the next after that. And I give them a really mundane example, like Batman, which is at this point 75 years old. Batman. And so when Bob Kane and Bill Finger created Batman, I don't think they said, okay, this is going to be a character that's going to last 75 years. But it resonated to such an extent that it made it through all these iterations. And I mean, there's been so many Batmans. But the core story stays with people, and it stays. I've seen fathers break it down. And I've done this where introduce them to the stories of Batman in the movies and the lore of Batman and who the villains are. And it's a whole thing. And it gets passed generation from generation to generation because the story resonates. And that's what we as creatives have to maintain. Because if you don't teach your children, this is a good story and this is why it's a good story, they won't know to create something like that. They'll just say, oh, okay, whatever, and make something that's not as good. And it won't last, because it really won't last. It won't make it past them. And here we are, Batman, 75 years later.
Yeah.
You know?
And good stories, as you say, last for a reason. That's the reason why Beatrice
There's
Potter's
reason.
stories have lasted
Yes.
this long. This
Yes.
movie will not last long. People will
This movie
watch
will
it in the
disappear.
cinema, they'll maybe
Yeah.
watch it on DVD, and it will fade from memory. But the good
I
stuff
don't even think
will remain.
DVD. I don't even think it'll hit. Maybe the people who watch it on DVD are the ones who didn't get to the theater. But after that, after its DVD run, you won't hear much of this movie. It'll disappear. It'll fade because it wasn't well made, and it wasn't made true to the story. In other words, it was someone's take on Peter Rabbit. It wasn't staying with the story itself. It was like, we're just going to modernize this, and it won't last, because you can still read Peter Rabbit today to kids, and they're still fascinated by the stories.
Because they're timeless. When you
Yes.
modernize something, you date it. It's timestamped
Yep.
2018, and that's great
And it
for
will
2018, but when 2020 or 2030, 2040 comes rolling
It won't be
around,
there. It won't be there.
it's
It
gone.
won't exist.
Yeah.
It'll be gone from the collective consciousness, and it certainly won't be something that people rush to get. Oh, let's get that movie from 2018. What was it, Peter Rabbit? Yeah, that's the one. That's not going to happen at all. So,
But thankfully, as you say, good stories last. And you know what? Tomb Yards and Butterflies, Montague and Strong, is a good story. And I'll take
Thank you.
that over fucking Peter Rabbit movie from Sony any day of the week. No
Me too.
question. And so thank you so much, Orlando, for joining us
You're
today.
very welcome, and thank you for having me.
Not at all. Now, Capers, don't forget, Leamington Comic Con, April 14th. You can still get tickets and come see us do a live broadcast of Pod Capers, you lucky sods. It's going to be a bargain. It's going to be a lot of fun. And if you enjoyed the show today, please tell your friends, shout out from the rooftops, and if you haven't already, go back and listen to some of our other super episodes. Like last year we talked with Anthony Johnston about many things, including his upcoming novel, The Explorer Code, which I have actually got a copy of right now, but I've yet to read it. I'm going to read it after I read Tomb Yards and Butterflies. So finish that. That's what we're going to read next. Follow up a little urban fantasy with a lovely spy thriller. And you can listen to the show.
Good.
I think it's going to be good. And you can listen to the show on iTunes, Podbean, YouTube, or at podcapers.com. We've got a Patreon. Check out the rewards, patreon.com/AP2HYC. If you want to get in touch with us, suggest show topics, or come on the show yourself, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at AP2HYC. Got a new email, podcapers@ap2hyc.com. Thank you very much to Dan Harris for our logo, the lovely microphone, the red and blue 3D glasses. Those are mine. And thank you for listening. This has been Podcapers, the official podcast of A Place to Hang Your Cape. Cue the music!